Hi everyone, welcome to the end of the week Vote Watch special. We're going through the number one topic this week, which, as you can guess, has been all the talk about the grooming gangs and everything that's going on as well. Joining me tonight, I've got Lee, Fleur, and Narinder. Thank you all for joining. Look, let's kick straight off into this. This has been the biggest story of the week since the new year, even. Is the grooming gang scandal being a bit over-exaggerated, or is this something which is going to be in the news now, going forwards, no matter what? Lee, let's start with you.
No, I definitely don't think it's being over-exaggerated. I think the reason this became big news so quickly was because of the transcripts, the court transcripts that were published a week or so ago. And I don't know if you've had a chance to read the transcripts, but they are utterly... I struggled to read them. I've got to admit, I really did struggle to get through. And that is what's caused the immediate emotional outrage, of which I completely understand. I share, probably like most people, the outrage. And it's why, actually, that it went global so quickly. So, of course, it went onto social media, onto Elon Musk's platform X. He read the transcripts and he's as outraged as the rest of us, and he's using his free speech to show his disapproval, rightly, of exactly what we've all seen and heard. So absolutely not. I do not think, if anything, for years this subject has been grossly neglected and not being discussed properly. So finally, it feels like this has become part of the national conversation, and we can thank Elon Musk for helping raise his profile for that reason.
I think the results are good for that reason. Elon later. And Fleur, I want to ask what your thoughts are. I mean, is this something where Keir Starmer and the Labour government, now that they've announced these local inquiries that will be nationally funded, hope this is going to sort of fade away?
I don't think this will ever fade away until justice is done, and that's not just for the rapists and paedophiles, but also for the people that enabled its cover-up. And that's why there's so much outrage. It's not just about the horrific crimes that were done, but the fact that it was institutionally covered up. And that's, I think, it may seem like it's being overblown to some people, but that's because a lot of the stuff happened in the past and has just never been fully dealt with. And until it is dealt with, then we can never sort of start to recover from it.
The whole debate of the grooming gang scandal has sort of been hijacked by, let's say, some unsavoury individuals that have got, sensible people off talking about this, getting into the details and stuff. Do you think it is what, the government says, all the far rights jumping on this bandwagon?
Of course, there are some people who are coming at it, I think, just because they are racist, and not because they genuinely care about the girls and victims of the grooming gangs. But I think everyone should be talking about it, and I think that just the fact that there's some unsavoury people who have an opinion on it doesn't mean that we should shut down the conversation. Like, it's got to be had.
What's your thoughts? Is this something now where it's become a bit of political football and constantly having chirps from the far right about this as well?
I think that when you use child sexual exploitation as a vehicle for Islamophobia, I think that's when it becomes extremely dangerous. But I do not think conversation should be shut down. I think, on the contrary, it's good that we are talking about child abuse, but we need to be talking about child abuse from all ethnicities and all religions, seeing as they make up 83% of child abuse, child grooming gangs in this country. But why is a narrative on just Pakistani grooming gangs? That's when it becomes a worry for people like myself who were Sikh, we're Hindus, there's, Afghans, and, to the racists, they can't tell a Muslim to a Sikh. And then you could all of a sudden, with language used by Musk, who, by the way, quite frankly, doesn't really care about child abuse, because if he did, he'd be talking about what's going on in America. They've got the worst stats for child abuse and grooming gangs and sex trafficking, but he doesn't talk about them. So it's a shame that he uses this as his racist vehicle to stir up hate in this country. And that's when it becomes a far-right
sticking
vehicle.
to things here in the UK, I'll
Islamophobia.
come back to you with this question. Do you think religion and cultural differences should play a part in this grooming gang scandal and in the inquiry? Do you think it actually plays a big part, or is it more just the fact of this has taken place and people want justice for the victims, regardless of colour, race, or creed?
I think that the fact is we should be talking about. We can all agree. I think all four of us, that we need to be taking on child abuse. This should be their perpetrators. Fleur, you're right. We need much stricter sentencing. But the fact is, when you say religion, when you have child grooming in churches, we don't blame all Christians. We don't point at all white men and say we want a national inquiry. But as soon as this is a brown man problem, suddenly we want national inquiry, and we should have inquiries. They should be happening. But the fact is, we have had a national inquiry. What needs happening is the implementation. That's what we need to see. And I'm sure that's what the victims have said, that they just want these recommendations
Your face painted
implemented.
1,000 words during that. Do you think we need another inquiry? And is it down to religion and culture?
The cover-up is down to race, and that's half of the problem, is that a lot of these men have not even been investigated. These rapists and paedophiles have not even been investigated because of fears of being called racist. And no one refuses to investigate white child abusers because of fears of racism, because, you know, it tends to be white judicial.
That's not actually correct, Fleur, because you've got the grooming gangs. There was one, the Cornwall one, the Wolverhampton one. They've taken 10, 15 years to get justice. It's the same. But you don't hear so much in the media or in the press about white grooming gangs, even though they make up the majority. It's amplified when it's Muslim. And all child abuse, all grooming gangs should be amplified. But why is it used as a, you know, it's very dangerous. We live in a world where if you are amplifying just Muslim, then do you really care about all child abuse?
Well, were the grooming gangs in Cornwall covered up for fear of like cultural insensitivity?
The grooming gangs from Russia. Sorry, can you hear
Were
me?
they covered up for fears of cultural insensitivity and racism?
But how do you know for a fact that these were? Because the fact that
Well,
they
I'll
have
ask the
been,
question
they
then.
have
The
been
one that
prosecuted,
Cornwall
haven't they?
gang started up for fear of cultural insensitivity.
When I'm answering it, I'm saying
You're not. Were they covered up? Yes or no?
no. But what I'm saying is, how do you know the Rochdale ones, etc., they were covered up
That's
for
been
that?
widely. Yeah, well,
There's lots of evidence
Lee,
for it.
let's come to you. Let's come to you. Do you think this is something where you know, cultural insensitivity, diversity, all those sorts of things that we try and, you know, bring out in society are actually now being an inhibitor to this and actually stopping the truth coming out? Do you think that's a big part of this?
Yeah, of course it is, and Flo is absolutely right. And you know, the reason, Narinder, that there is a special focus on ethnicity is because they are. By the way, to start off, I just want to say no one is denying that majority of the sex offenders are white. We are a predominantly white country, and those stats should not be refuted by anyone. But what's been widely reported and noted, both in the media and in Parliament, where they discussed the J report, for example, is that ethnicity, especially certainly in the Pakistani community, they're very massively overrepresented. And there's two reasons why.
In those areas, not nationally. In those areas.
Well, we don't know nationally because they refuse to have a national inquiry, but it appears wherever there are grooming gangs, the Pakistani community is massively overrepresented.
No, that's
In
in
fact,
those areas. Only in those
Narinder, I
areas.
don't know why you're even arguing with these statistics. They're just statistics. That's it. I'm not giving any emotion. That's just a fact. Just in the same way as I've acknowledged that the majority of these sex offenders are white because we are predominantly a white country. That's fact. But they are massively overrepresented. And it has been discussed widely that is the reason. And Fleur is absolutely right to point out one of the biggest problems we have with this, with these Pakistani rape gangs, is ethnicity became a reason why they were able to get away with it for so long. So it's absolutely right that the ethnicity is discussed in this situation. What I find absolutely horrific is, and I'm not saying you personally are doing this, Narinder, before you think that I am. I promise you I'm not. But we've seen it over the last, 48 hours, possibly even longer, maybe the last few weeks since this has been raised. The constant attempt by predominantly left-wing politicians to shut down the debate of anyone wanting to talk facts about this. We've seen it in the Welsh Parliament. We've seen it in the London Assembly with Sadiq Khan. We've seen Keir Starmer himself calling everyone jumping on a far-right bandwagon who wants to discuss this. And this is because they want to shut down debate. And I don't think it's working anymore. I think that the mood has changed. Thank God. Again, thank God we're discussing this properly now. And people are feeling like we can talk about the fact that there are Pakistani communities that are very overrepresented when it comes to child exploitation, sexual exploitation. And we need to talk about it. And there's nothing more to it than that. And the more that people sort of cry, this is people being racist, I'm sorry, that is part of the reason why we are in this mess in the first place.
I don't think people are saying, look, there seems to be this on the far right side, that South Asian communities, Muslim communities aren't talking about this. We are. No one is saying this is a good thing.
And no one's tarring everyone with the same brush either, Narinder.
Yeah. So no, I agree. Conversations should never been shut down then, and they shouldn't be being shut down now. We can all agree with that. Where I think it becomes dangerously is when you only focus it on Pakistani grooming gangs.
But this is about Pakistani grooming gangs. That is what the transcripts were about, Narinder.
If you're bothered about child abuse, you should be carried about all child abuse. It doesn't matter about the religion, the ethnicity. It shouldn't matter. Therefore, you've got an agenda.
But that's what's being investigated. They are investigating specifically
Pakistani rape gangs. I want to bring Fleur in on this, because Fleur's been sitting there listening very patiently, and her face says 1,000 words. Fleur, I want to ask you this question. This was all brought to light mainly by Elon Musk at the start of the new year. Now, two parts to that. Is Elon Musk therefore far right because he's focusing on this, which apparently you only will focusing on if you are far right according to this government? And secondly, do you think Elon Musk has actually opened an avenue for everyone else to talk about, or is it purely him and his agenda?
He's absolutely not far right. I think that he had his attention drawn to the situation and rightly found how unbelievable and horrific it is. Putting myself in his shoes, if I heard a story of white grooming gangs in Pakistan where they were specifically targeting Pakistani girls, calling them racial slurs, and it seemed like their motive was racial, which it seems to be the same situation here, I would be appalled. I would be tweeting about it. I'd be saying this is disgusting. Why is it being covered up? Human rights clearly not so great in Pakistan, but it's an issue. But I think he's definitely opened up the avenue. I mean, obviously he bought Twitter, and some people don't like the way he's running it, but it's good to have a social media where sort of views and discussions which are not particularly well liked by the left are able to flourish and have some discussion and bring it to attention. And now, because of that, it's now being discussed in Parliament and on mainstream news, like on the BBC and in newspapers, and it's finally being brought back to attention. And maybe this is the time that something will actually be done. There's cases of Pakistani grooming gangs going back to the 1950s. And the first time that it was properly investigated, well, the Times journalist that covered it started in 2003, did one story, felt like he was going to be called racist, as keeps happening, and then didn't return to it again until 2010. So this is decades and decades and decades, and no justice has been done on a big enough scale. So finally, hopefully, the fact that one billionaire in America has managed to bring the story to the forefront of everyone's discussions, I think it's fantastic.
Lee, what's your thoughts?
Can I just say that?
Hold on, Narinder. Hold on. I'm going to come to you. Don't worry. I just want to quickly go to Lee. Lee, do you think Elon's on the money here, or do you think he's actually opened a can of worms which is allowing everybody into this discussion now, and actually we need to leave this for those investigations and for those local inquiries.
No, he's absolutely on the money. And I think if anyone has a heart, they would agree he's exactly on the money. And thank God that it's a shame, really. It really is a shame that it has taken Elon Musk for it to become big news. And the fact that he brought Twitter. I mean, that's a really good point that Fleur just made. Imagine if the left still owned Twitter as it was now. I think anyone trying to type the word in Pakistani rape gang would have been immediately banned. I think we know that is what would happen. So his influence has been excellent, and I'm very, very pleased that he's shown an interest into UK politics quite a lot recently. It's not just these grooming gangs. He feels a connection to the UK. He calls the UK the motherland. We're responsible for the English language. And I believe he's got, I found out today, he's got an English grandma. So he's actually entitled to apply for citizenship, believe it or not, of which he's not allowed to do in the United States. So he could even one day run for Prime Minister, probably through reform. But no, I'm probably going a little bit too far, obviously. But he, just looking at it from a human being point of view, he read those transcripts like everyone else read those transcripts. And I think what we saw initially was just pure, raw human emotion. Because I can tell you what, when I read those transcripts, probably like everyone else, I was absolutely... I couldn't speak for about an hour after reading them. I have to constantly try and block it out of my mind. The anger seethes through every single cell of my body. So I understand fully why Elon Musk has spoken about this. And what's made me laugh, and I think Liam Halligan raised this brilliantly on Question Time, is the left have started to use Elon Musk as a distraction tactic to talk about hurty words that Elon Musk might be putting on social media, because it's a lot easier to discuss that than it is about Pakistani rape gangs, of which sadly has happened majority.
Narinder, I want to bring this back and sort of give you a spot here to talk about. I really want to focus on the victim in all of this, because we can all talk as much as we want. We can all point the finger. We can all try and find someone to blame. But at the end of the day, the victim is the most important thing here. And I have heard so many stories about victims finding out not only their abuser is out of jail, but even got a job in the local community. I've heard stories of one victim, for example, their abuser was a delivery driver and turned up at the door. All these sorts of things. I want to give a very quick shout out to Charlie Peters for all the work that Charlie Peters did exposing all of this and investigating for so many months. That's exactly the sort of investigative journalism you want. But Narinder, sort of focusing on the victim, what do you think victims want in all of this? Do they want us to be talking like this, or do they actually just want to see some action?
No, and that's the thing. I feel I feel a bit on edge, because I think, who are we to be all talking about this? Because it's so complex. And I think what I think from what I'm reading, and obviously I have read the transcripts as well, Lee, and you're right. I read them and I actually have to drop my phone and just sit there going, oh my God, that can't actually be real. But then I need to put the shoe on the other foot and say, well, have you read transcripts of white grooming gang victims? Because they are equally as disturbing. Because again, we're focusing so much on just one. We're just concentrating on Pakistani grooming gangs, as we should be talking about them, but it shouldn't be a sole focus. Yeah. But going back to the victims, Matthew, I think stricter sentencing. I mean, I'm appalled that actually they're still walking past the criminal, and then he came and delivered food. That's outrageous.
Well, this is the thing. So on sentencing, there's been gangs that have been hauled up in court and got between 14 and 3 years. 3 years for participation in a grooming gang. So I'll quickly fire around everyone. I mean, Narinder, do you think offenders are getting away with a slap on the wrist, or are we actually seriously going to get on with this?
Well, I think seriously get on with the implementations, because I looked at the recommendations, a few of them from the J report, and one of them was actually people in the community, in any community, if you have any kind of suspicion, they need to report. If they don't, they will also face criminal time and prosecution, as they should. So I think there's a lot of recommendations, and I think there's implementations need to be done. The Tory government didn't bother, obviously, and you know, the Labour government, we need this done by Easter, and I think that's what the victims want. But again, I mean, I'm sure Fleur and Lee will agree we need stricter sentences.
Absolutely.
3 years
Fleur,
is no time.
thoughts?
Life sentences for the paedophile rapists, and well, also if they raped people over the age of consent, which I'm certain that they did, and jail for everybody that was involved in covering up and stalling investigations, destroying notes, destroying reports, refusing to investigate. The police that arrested the 11-year-old girls that were drunk and disorderly whilst all were being abused, they should be in jail because they enabled it to carry on for years and years.
You're
and
in
it's still
charge.
going on
Sort it all
today.
out. Lee?
I'd love to be.
I second that. I think what's most important to the victims, and I've seen this in statements as well, is they want justice. And I think that is what is the most important thing about this inquiry that hasn't yet been announced, in my view, is we need to see, as Fleur said, we need to see councillors, police officers, in some cases MPs. We need to see child protection officers. We need to see the police. We need to see people held to account, and we need to see prosecutions, and we need to see people go to jail, and we need to see people lose their jobs. That is what needs to happen for me. That's why I was absolutely livid when I heard the announcement from Yvette Cooper about this lame sort of, I can't even just, it's not really even inquiry. Covers, 5 areas out of 50 towns. They're only putting 5 million into it when I think Oldham or Telford alone cost 8 million. There's no statutory powers at all. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're on the left or you're right or right. Everyone has got to admit that what Yvette Cooper announced is not even close to being adequate for this.
But Lee, can I just say that out of all the inquiries at Hillsborough, Brenta, no one's been brought to justice.
Well, this is what that I was going to add just very quickly. I was going to finish off by saying it doesn't need to take 7 years. This can take less than 12 months if they do it properly. And Narinder's absolutely right to point that out. We've never had that before. That's one thing that if you look at the COVID inquiry, it's a complete waste of time and money. The whole thing is an absolute joke. So what I'm saying is it has to have justice. That's not what's been announced. It has to have people being put in prison and penalised for their actions. And if that doesn't happen,
do you think
then nothing is
I'm
sufficient.
going to come around the whole panel with this? Do you think that actually we don't need another inquiry? We don't need another rubber stamping of look through the paperwork and check if you missed anything, which is effectively what Labour have announced. What we need is those actions and those recommendations from all the previous reports to be implemented. And frankly, similar to the COVID inquiry, we know what happened. We know what went wrong. Hindsight is a wonderful thing. But actually, I could probably write down now all the recommendations that the COVID inquiry is going to come up with. But I can do it now. They're going to do it in however many years' time. So, I mean, why do we need it?
Well, there's thousands of victims. It takes a long time. But, oh God, my mind just went blank there. Sorry.
There, comes you.
My mind just went blank. Sorry.
Don't worry, I'll come back.
I had so much to say there.
Yeah, I think it's necessary to have a national inquiry. I do not envy the person coordinating it because of the decades of cover-up. It's just going to make it so much harder, and the fact that notes and minutes from meetings were destroyed is going to make it much harder. And yeah, but I think it's the only way that we'll have a thorough...
So you think Labour were wrong to block a call for another national inquiry? You think we should have another national inquiry? Yeah. Okay. Narinder.
I think so. Yeah.
Can I just say, this isn't another inquiry.
Yeah.
It's a proper inquiry, and that's what's desperately needed. I totally get Narinder's point about the thousands of victims. What we need to focus on is the processes and the people that are involved in covering this up. And that has not been done on a national scale. We need to, for stealing a phrase, we need to join the dots up. And that's why it's such a letdown to see that only five towns have been represented out of a possible 50. So we do need a national inquiry. I think Labour may well find themselves forced into a national inquiry, depending on public opinion. But we've seen polling just recently, so the last 24 hours, comes out that says 75% of the public. It's quite a substantial
Where
poll
was
as
this
well.
polling from? Where?
I can't remember what it is. It's a big poll. So you'll find it on X if you have a look at it. But 75% of people of the British public support a full national inquiry. Keir Starmer and the Labour Party can't be more out of touch with the public on this, or the victims. So it needs to happen, and it needs to happen on a national scale. It doesn't need to take 7 years. It should be limited to 1 year. It needs more than just statutory powers. It needs to be a police-led investigation. That's what it needs to be.
That go.
There was so much before, but before I wanted to say that, because Fleur, you mentioned that if this was in Pakistan, because you're very focused on the cover up, as no cover, any cover up should be exposed, and we can all agree on that. And you said in Pakistan, if it was white grooming gangs, you'd be sure they'd be going, mad. But if you were here in Britain and you heard about white grooming gangs, say in India, but they were only focusing on white grooming gangs and not the other grooming gangs, let's be honest, the rape of children is worldwide. Would you not think, well, hang on a minute, why are they only focusing on white grooming gangs and not Indian and Pakistan grooming gangs, which are the majority? Doesn't matter, they're racist?
I mean, if the situation was that they were covered up because they were white people, I would be slightly more concerned about that, because I would sort of assume that justice, as much as they had possible, was being done for the sort of native brewing gangs. Which, yeah, I think they are investigated here when it's white grooming gangs, which I don't know.
Investigated and then being prosecuted.
Could you tell me about an area where there's been a notorious white grooming gang? Because I don't actually know of any.
Where in this country?
Yeah, like a notorious case.
Well, you won't know any because they're never amplified in the media. There's hundreds of white grooming gangs. Are you for real?
Where did you? I'm just unaware of it. I don't know.
Cornwall, Wolverhampton.
Hold on.
Gosh,
you just spent the last 20 minutes saying you shouldn't be focusing on the ethnicity and race, and now you're saying actually let's focus on this.
Absolutely. No, because Fleur is because you seem to want an inquiry on the Pakistani grooming gangs. There is an inquiry has been done. If you're bothered about child abuse, you should want an inquiry, as have been done on all child grooming, on all child sexual exploitation.
Hold on, Narinder. What Lee was saying was he wants an inquiry on the cover-ups. Fundamentally, that's the focus. The focus on the cover-up, regardless of race, ethnicity, or background.
Right. Okay. Oh no, we do need an inquiry on any cover-up.
I'll come back to you.
There's a very specific there is a very, very specific reason why we are focusing, Narinder, at the moment on Pakistani rape gangs. The reason being is because of the uniqueness of the situation, the fact that by the very ethnicity of the people that are involved, it has led to a widespread cover-up and victims being left completely out in the dry by the state. So that is why we are focusing at the moment on Pakistani rape gangs. There are child groomers who are being arrested by the police who are white from every other ethnicity all day, every day. That is still happening. At the moment, we are focusing on a very, very specific issue that desperately needs to be focused on. And people, I'm sorry to say it, Narinder, like you, who are saying that the moment that we focus on this, that you're shouting racism and you're focusing on race, you are becoming part of the problem. What you need to do, Narinder, is you need to support what's going on. You need to support the fact that people are talking about it, and you need to stop intimating or saying that people are racist for just because we're focusing on this at the moment. We'll focus on other things at another time.
I haven't used the word racist once. I'm saying that if you care about child sexual
You've used the word racist multiple times on this podcast.
I haven't said racist.
You have. People will be able to see if they just rewind back. You said it about 10 minutes ago when you were speaking to Fleur about, would you say that was racism in the...
I said, would you say it's racism?
But that's exactly what you're doing. You're comparing this to racism every time you speak.
I didn't say you're racist for wanting that, though. I said, if you put it the other way around...
The only person bringing racism into it, Narinder, is you. No one else.
Hold on. Are you using influence in a minute? I want to bring this back. I genuinely want to bring it away from ethnicity, because we could talk about ethnicity and culture as much as we want. I think the point Lee's trying to make is the fact that ethnicity was the reason that this was covered up. Unlike if it was, as you're trying to say, Narinder, a white grooming gang, we wouldn't hear about that as much because we don't talk about white grooming gangs. We look for the ethnicity, whatever. I see
Correct.
both points. I think coming back to all of this though, what needs to be done to deter future child abuse, and also to put a nail in the coffin for this, because the grooming gangs and the everything about Rochdale and Rotherham, all these things that we've heard before, comes up again and again and again, almost every 5-10 years. What needs to be done now? What's going to be different now to see this done, put to bed, and everyone is not happy, but feels like we can now move forward and build bridges? Narinder, I'll come to you.
I think stricter sentencing and implementation of the recommendations of the J report. I think that needs to be done swiftly. Swiftly should have been done, 5 years ago. Should have been done a long time ago. So, and I think, again, it's so complex. And I think victims, I think we need to be looking at exactly what they wanted. And I think that when you say police-led as well, Lee, they're so underfunded. This is so politicized that people forget the police are so underfunded. They need more money to be able to do everything.
Hence why we need an inquiry.
Yeah, and I agree. We can all agree on that. But actually, if you look at it, if you really want that, the police need more money. Billions more money.
That's why
more
I was so
taxes are going up
disappointed to
to
hear
pay for police funding. That's another debate. We will talk about later. What is going to bring peace of mind to the victims and end this once and for all in the UK? Or is this stupid? Am I stupid for thinking that we're going to be able to end this and it will always be okay?
No, it's possible. I think it's possible. With dedication and what we need is the law applies equally to everyone, and that you can't non-investigate someone because you're scared of being called racist. I think that, as I said, anyone involved in the cover-up should be in jail. Life sentences for the perpetrators. If they were born abroad, they should be deported, because you can't come to a country and abuse their citizens, especially when much of the abuse involved specific targeting because the girls were white, calling them white slags and white.
Oh, by the way, can I just say that's what I was supposed to say? The very first victims, and you mentioned this could possibly be going back to the 70s. 80s, it was Sikh girls who were actually targeted, brown girls. So
I read from the newspaper archive that they were English girls.
Well, these were Sikh girls. The Sikh girls were actually targeted.
I'm sure they were both. But,
and 80s. So it wasn't they were just targeted. And actually Pakistani girls were also targeted. But actually also research would show that Sikh and Pakistani girls and Hindu girls are too scared to come forward because of the stigma. So they're too scared to talk about this. So we don't even know the full figures or the full stats.
Yeah,
but Sikh girls were targeted in the 70s
let,
and 80s.
Letting you have your piece. What you're saying is, frankly, legal link is absolutely 100% safe for anybody to come forward and say anything at all, but with absolute protection that they are not going to then find themselves in the dock.
Yes, and regarding the victims, we need to look into why some victims are still in hiding. I mean, some families had to move abroad because they were getting threats. There were houses burnt down. There were threats of, if you report this to the police, I'll rape your sister and your mother. And there are victims that are still in hiding that they've already had their lives and everything ruined, and they are having to live a completely separate life, like away from everything they've ever known because of this. Why are they still in hiding? Is it because they're still getting threats? If they are still getting threats, the people threatening them also must be dealt with, like, to the absolute strength of the law. A lot of the victims refuse, the majority refuse when they speak to TV to have their face shown, and we need to figure out why they're still so scared. And I think it's because they are still being threatened. And until all of this is dealt with, this is going to keep happening in this country. And I think we all just want it to be over.
Lee, am I just dreaming, or will we get there one day, just not quick enough for anyone?
No, we will definitely get there. It's just gonna take a lot of time to do it. But I think that we need to start doing it as soon as possible. And for me, I was just thinking while I was listening to Fleur, who I completely agree with, and Narinder, I don't disagree with what you said either in some respects, is that if I was sat in a council office where you know full well that people who you work with have turned a blind eye, what I would need to see is a change of culture. And I think what leads to that change of culture is arrests, and it needs the full force of the law. If I found out that, you know, my colleague who I'd known for 15 years had just been sent to prison for 5 years because they turned a blind eye, because they looked the other way, that would immediately have an impact on me. I wouldn't be like that anyway. I'd like to think that I would be the first person not to turn a blind eye. I just don't know how anybody can do it. That's just how my brain works. However, I know that if you start physically using the law to reprimand these people, put them into prison, and rightly, as Fleur said, deport people who are not born in this country, I think that will be the start of a recovery for the, because it's the system that has helped create this.
I think the other thing that we're missing, all of us are missing here, and this is way more important than ethnicity and religion, is class. The one thing that I'm seeing from all of this grooming gang talk is these are working class girls from working class communities. No one cared. No one cared because they were white. They didn't care because they were working class. And that's the tragedy here. If these were rich girls, would they have middle class girls, would they have cared more? Yes. So I think that the really sad thing here is we're so concentrating on religion, we're forgetting this is a poor girl's problem. It's terrible. They're actually poor girls. Poor young girls are being let down because they're not rich enough.
Well, they were targeted because they were vulnerable, and I think it's absolutely disgusting. And I know when I was reading some of the stories, which like I just have to like put them down every so often because I feel sick, and I just think this was going on when I was the age of those girls, and if I had just happened to have been born in different circumstances, that could have been me, and the horrors of it. So like the fact that it's so horrible for us to read, and they've lived through it. The fact that they were targeted as well because of their vulnerable status. And
that's why they were targeted, because they were vulnerable. It's terrible. And no, we're not having that conversation.
Lee, final word to you.
Just to finish on this. Just to finish on, what worries me about that, and I don't mean to finish on a downer, but I feel like I almost have to, is that I don't think we are going to get a full proper inquiry under this Labour government. I think and that's what really worries me. They're so up to their necks in it that, you know, we've already seen Yvette Cooper try and whitewash it already. I mean, that is quite a thing to see, the fact she stood up in the Commons and whitewashed it like that. And that is what worries me. And the reason being is because the people that are involved are so high up. You've got, you know, this will, and of course the Muslim vote. You know, this is another thing that they're very, very worried about. You've got Jess Phillips and
about the Muslim vote.
Just let me finish, Narinder, otherwise I'll lose my train of thought.
Okay, sorry.
So West Streeting, Narinder, I almost said Narinder. There you go. Look, West Streeting, Jess Phillips. They're all on, you know, literally 500 votes in it or something like that. And unfortunately for Keir Starmer, he was Director of Public Prosecutions through the majority of the
and he did a lot.
What we've been discussing. He did, Narinder, and I think that's what he's worried about. He's going to be exposed for his failings in the DPP. I
think if you're saying that they're worried about, if we're worried about the Muslim vote, they would never have supported Israel. They lost the Muslim vote with the whole Gaza Palestine.
The Labour Party has literally called for Netanyahu to be arrested. And they've also suspended arms sales.
Labour have literally lost every Muslim vote when they supported Israel.
But Narinder, coming to the point of what Lee was saying, do you think that this government is going to be the vehicle for bringing around justice?
Yes, because actually from what I've read, again, look, I can only go, there's so much out there and it's very complex. And this is why I was and I think that actually a lot of the victims have said that no one could have done more and cared more than Jess Phillips. And that woman, the way she was targeted by Muslims.
She cared so much, she hasn't even spoken to her.
I don't want to open up a can of worms here again, but if Jess Phillips, credit to her, absolutely campaigned heavily about this throughout her whole political career, saying the people in power should do something. Why then, the minute that she's the person in power, did she not do anything? No,
They're implementing. They've implemented the record. The
Well,
Tories
that's-
have been for 14 years.
No.
You can't
Hold on,
blame
that's
Labour
complete-
now.
Well, I was
You're
going to pick
literally
up on it earlier,
wrong.
but you've given me a second chance. Theresa May was the one in 2014 who opened up the inquiry report. Sajid Javid was the one who said, let's go and gather data on the ethnicity because nobody else was. And then Rishi Sunak opened up the grooming gangs task force that put 500 to 1,000 people behind bars. So the Tories did nothing?
They didn't implement any of the recommendations from the
They
did
Gender
did.
implement
Board.
a
Rishi
couple of
Sunak
them,
implemented
Narinder.
the grooming
They did
gangs
implement
task
a
force that
couple
put
of them.
500 behind bars.
But they are both as bad as each other. I'll give Narinder that. They are both as bad as each other. Kemi Badenoch has not even used the word grooming gang her entire time that she's been in Parliament, full stop. The first time she's mentioned it is because everyone else is talking about it. Labour are up to their necks in it. You know, these are all predominantly Labour-held constituencies, and this is going to be a PR disaster for the Labour Party. So between the two of them, the Uni Party, they have absolutely let down the victims. And they have created a culture within our establishment that people have been able to turn a blind eye and cover it up. And I'm sick of it. I'm not going to lie. I'm absolutely sick of both parties. I would argue that we need to get rid of both of them.
I'm sure you would, but
there.
we'll save that for a different debate.
You're going to wait 4.5 years,
Fleur,
Lee.
I want to. Fleur,
You're
I'll
gonna
come
wait
to you
4.5 years.
for
Hopefully
maybe
not,
the
but yeah,
final
you're probably
word on
right.
this and just a bit of perspective on it. This whole thing, this whole grooming gang scandal, rape gang scandal, whatever you want to call it, frankly, it does take a bit of what Lee and a bit of Narinder, a bit of what I and you are all saying. Put politics aside, put ethnicity and race aside, and just get things done. Stop talking and take some action. Is it?
Yeah, and I apologise that when I get the chance for the final word, my washing machine's just kicked in to do its things.
Did not want that one.
There we go.
I thought it was Narinder again.
Yeah, it just needs to get done. And from this point onwards, if anyone tries to hold it back, if anyone is treated the way that Maggie Oliver was treated and silenced and shut up and stop causing trouble, then they need to be out immediately if anyone's trying to hold this back. And also I think people like the police and social workers need to have some really strict training to say, treat everyone the same, regardless of race. If someone's committing a crime, they're committing it there. But if someone's vulnerable and you suspect they're a victim of something, help them. Like, that's what needs to happen.
Thank you for saying it.
Pretty quick.
Thank you for saying it as it is. And
Let's
thank you.
hope.
The only spin is your washing machine, not from you. So thank you very much. So I'm gonna call it there because we could go on and on and on about this for hours and hours. There is so much out there to unpick. But I just want to say a massive thank you to Lee, Fleur, Narinder for here for my weekly wrap. Look, it has been a busy week. Thank you very much, and let's keep the conversation going. And please, let's make sure that the victims are at the heart of this. Cheers.